Let's continue the conversation around policing and get reaction now on the new police minister's plan to reduce the ever-rising crime levels in the country. Joining me for this conversation is Policing Union. In fact, the name of the union is Independent Policing Union of South Africa. Mpho Kwinika is a representative of that union, and alongside him is anti-crime advocacy group, Gun-Free South Africa. It's represented by Adele Kirsten. To both of you, thank you very much for your time. Can I start with you, Mr. Kwinika, as a person who represents police officers within your union? The police minister today outlining his priorities. I don't want to poison your mind just yet. Give us your sense of whether you think the police's priorities, at least at ministerial level, are indeed what is going to turn the situation around within the police force.
Well, good evening, Toli, and your viewers at home. A very warm and acceptable statement from the minister, because he knows very well that he will need these men and women in blue to realize the objectives that is setting forthwith in the fight against crime. He had spoken a lot about the issue, the working conditions of our men and women in blue. He had spoken about the police stations, the infrastructure at our police stations, how they look like now. He spoke about the issue of the attacks and how he will want that to be addressed. But he was not shy as well to speak about professionalism within the South African Police Service. And I think that is a very good statement, balanced as it is, because if you want to earn the respect of the public, you also have to give same to them by being transparent, open, and responsible as well. Yeah. So we welcome that statement.
Adele Kirsten, let's come to you, and I'd like to get your initial thoughts before we talk about the ease with which criminals get their hands on guns in South Africa. The minister talking about public trust. How do you think they ought to earn that?
Good evening, Polly, and also to Mpho Kwinika. I think I just want to echo some of what Mpho said, is that I think it's a very encouraging statement. I think for the first time in a long time, we have a minister who's acknowledging that crime levels are unacceptable, that they're increasing, and he foregrounded this issue of public safety. I think he also recognizes and says so very clearly in his statement that guns are the weapon of choice for criminals. And he then also identifies certain locations such as the Western Cape, Cape Flats, some places in Eastern Cape and Gauteng as hotspots. And in addition, mentions that children are being caught in the crossfire. So it feels like he's been listening to some of what civil society has been saying. And in fact, he also acknowledges that civil society has an important role to play in making communities safer. I think there are some gaps. So, for example, he recognizes the importance of the legislative framework and that some laws need to be amended, but he doesn't mention the Firearms Control Act. And I'm interested in why that's not mentioned, because we know if we are going to deal with reducing the easy availability of guns, we have to strengthen the gun law.
All right, let's come back to you then, Mpho Kwinika. The minister talks about crime intelligence being the backbone of policing. What needs to be done to get that right?
He had spoken about strengthening its crime intelligence by employing more police officials to deal with, to be posted at crime intelligence. He said he will go and borrow or make sure that in his budget is going to make sure that the money is available to employ more. But crime intelligence will also need a lot of technology that is being utilized But the other world, in policing, the issues of the grabber machines, which we were told not long that these machines were outdated because they could only take 3Gs and all that. We will want to see them being equipped with the better equipment, which will be able to track down criminals and even intercepting their networks with the purpose of disrupting them. The current equipments which they are very few, but I'm not saying that they are not capable of utilizing them to do what they have sourced them for, but we'll want to see many of those things happening. So there is a lot of things that they will need to do with crime intelligence to resource them as well, because currently there's a lot of complaints that are taking place in that environment. The HR issues that need to be looked at, the vehicles that are posted at crime intelligence are being used by senior management instead of them being utilized by the foot soldiers. So he's got a lot of work to do.
Adele, if guns are the weapon of choice for criminals, why is it that we still have so many of them in our streets?
Well, we know that the biggest source of illegal guns is the legal trade, which is why going upstream and strengthening your gun law is a really important intervention for the minister to consider. But we know there are a lot of factors that drive the availability of guns moving from the legal into the illicit market. One is poor implementation of the Firearms Control Act. The other is poor record keeping in the Central Firearms Registry. It's really a cornerstone of good and effective gun control. But we know that the CFR is a mess. And right now, the kind of poor record keeping that's happening is a key opportunity for fraud and corruption. So the fraudulent issuing of licenses, the selling of training certificates. So all along the chain of the control of guns, there are weaknesses both in oversight to prevent fraud and corruption, but also poor implementation of the law. And then, of course, we have organized crime. We have loss and theft from legal stocks. That includes the state, SAPS 13 stores, from the state armory. It includes private security, and it includes civilians. We lose something like 24 guns every single day, move, either through loss or theft from the legal trade, from the legal, from the legal trade into the illicit market, essentially into the criminal economy. And so you have to have, talking about crime intelligence, you need specialist firearms units that go after and recover these illegal guns. You have to get those guns off the street, and then you have to turn off the source. You have to turn off the tap. You have to reduce the supply. So you have to do both of those things. They have to be priorities. He doesn't mention either of those, and I'm assuming that's because it might be too much detail. But we're looking forward to, it certainly opens up a door for an organization like Gun Free South Africa and civil society to engage seriously now with the minister. He sent some very clear signals. It opens up the door for us to begin to engage him on some of the detail.
Yeah. Mr. Kwinika, let's come back to you. Police stations are the centers, or should we say, are the interface between the ordinary South African and the police officer. That's where we get the real sense as to whether or not police know what they are doing, or they are either enthusiastic or less so about doing their jobs. The minister speaking about reviewing the inner workings of police stations. How important is that in order to, I guess, improve this relationship between the ordinary man on the street and the officer?
The environment must be user-friendly. It must be accepting of an ordinary person who does not normally consume the product that is being offered by the South African Police Service. There are people who really will not in their life will love to go into that space. But when they had an opportunity to go in there, they need to be treated with respect. We need to be responsible and accountable to these people, because it is through their work, it is through our work that will make them to even help us to fight crime, because fighting crime is not going to be an easy thing without the involvement of the public. I want to also speak to issues of the infrastructure that we have, the South African Police Service, and pass our deepest and heartfelt condolences to the family in Bizana. Our police officers who have been killed, attacked there. One of them died. But from that incident, we should learn that the police stations are not good. They are not providing good safes to look after the guns that are issued to them. We lost 5 pistols there and 1 rifle. And it is these issues which makes the public to whinge against the services that the police are providing. But we can't keep on complaining about our police officials saying they are not doing sufficient to do this. There's something that we need to do on our own. And the minister spoke to these issues. The issue of having refresher courses, which will help us to deal with violence that is meted out against us, just like the one that we saw happening in the Eastern Cape in the early hours of this morning.
Yeah. Final thoughts from you, Ms. Kirsten, and it's to do with a very sad story. Mpho Kwinika, on the one hand, mentions the Eastern Cape, the incident that has occurred there. There's a forensic investigator who, according to media reports, was about to crack the guns for hire syndicate within the Johannesburg Metro Police Department. That person clearly assassinated. This clearly speaks to the question of the control of guns in South Africa. You earlier made reference to the Firearms Control Act and that needing to be strengthened. Is that where we need to start in order to reduce the ease with which these illegal guns are made available? By the way, the ones that, if indeed the media reports are talking about that are for hire, those ones are certainly legal and they're being hired out by corrupt elements within the JMPD.
No. Probably you're really putting your finger on it. It's exactly that, is illegal guns come from the legal trade. And there's a ready source of that, whether they're the state armory, whether they're in law enforcement armories. But people, because guns are so highly prized by criminals, often people who are in charge of safeguarding these guns recognize that there's an opportunity to make some money. And that's why things like strong oversight, having very clear guidelines, both on the physical safekeeping of weapons, but also the personnel who are responsible for that safekeeping. There has to be very, very tight control. The gun law can allow for that. But it's also about implementation, and it's about oversight, and it's about doing audits and monitoring much more regularly than what's currently happening. But one of the only ways in which you can, in fact, assassinate someone is also through the use of a gun. So what it's telling you is that, just as in the case of Kwinika, of Colonel Kwinika, these are 2 people who are on to something, and this thing goes high up, and people want to kill the person, eliminate them, as is the language in the field. And so this is also dangerous work, but it's absolutely critical that all of these loopholes are closed and that we reduce the availability of guns, and also the opportunity for this kind of corruption that's happening all along the chain in the control of firearms in this country.
Adele Kirsten, I'd like to thank you very much for your thoughts and contribution to this important discussion. Adele Kirsten is with the anti-crime advocacy group, Gun Free South Africa. Alongside her is Mpho Kwinika, who is with the Independent Policing Union of South Africa.